Cool. So just some kind of general tips on shooting video. If you download Rush, you can actually record video directly to Rush, which is pretty cool. You don't have to do that, but it does give you a little bit more control over your camera. But generally, when you're recording video, hopefully you guys can kind of see my setup here. I'm decently lit. I have like a light that's sitting kind of right up there. If I put my hand over, you can't see it. But basically, when you are shooting video, kind of two key considerations. Well, I guess three, but we'll go with like the two kind of physical space ones: lighting, and then what your room sounds like, are kind of the two things that I recommend you take a look at. So most of you will be shooting this. Do most of us have a smartphone with a camera on it that we will be shooting from? Don't want to assume here. Okay, I'll take the silence as a yes. So basically, when you're shooting with your cameras, you kind of want to just look through the viewfinder, make sure it doesn't look grainy and things like that. If you are, one of the chief components to video is audio. So when you're shooting your video, listen to your room before you shoot. If you hear an overhead fan and then then a fan on the floor, like a floor fan or whatever, those will show up in your video. So be sure to turn those off, or move to a space where it's not there. If there's dogs barking everywhere, or most of us aren't going out anymore, but basically you wouldn't want to record next to a generator on the side of a freeway because it's going to be hard to kind of remove that noise. So so what about being outside? Yeah, for sure, you can be outside. I mean, like, natural noise that's in the world is okay. Like, I really wouldn't want to be, like, if there are like birds chirping and things like that, that's not too big a deal and can kind of be nice. Because like it doesn't need to be like a completely quiet space, but a relatively quiet space. Like if it's really windy outside, you probably want to be kind of shielded from the wind so you don't get that like type of sound when you're listening to the audio back. So those are just kind of two things to consider. Where you're at, not only like visually but sonically. And if you're unsure, like, literally sit where you're going to sit, record the room for a little bit, then like with headphones, listen back. And if it's super noisy in those headphones, then you may want to kind of see what you can do to minimize that space. Especially with wind, sometimes even if the wind's light, it's hard to tell. So that's a way you can handle that. Cool. Make sense? Cool. So just kind of some things to think about. And then lastly, but not leastly, when you're recording video, you generally, you want what are called heads and tails on your footage. So you want to start 3 or 4 seconds before you think you're going to start talking. So, and then you want to end 3 or 4 seconds after you're done. That will give you what are called heads and tails on the clips that you're doing, so that you can trim and edit those pieces together, so that if you needed a little bit more footage for a transition you wanted to do or something like that, you have that content. So there's a reason why like there are countdown timers and things like that, and why like on movie sets they say lights, camera, action. Lights are lights. The lights, make sure lights are on. Camera is the camera rolling. That's that 4 or 5 seconds I was talking about. And then action is when you start talking. So that just gives you some more room to play as you're editing. So those are kind of some general tips that I think will be useful before you kind of start editing here. And then final thing, if you're going to be editing on a computer, putting a folder on your computer wherever your footage is going to be, then putting all of your footage in that folder will make it way easier to find. So just some kind of general housekeeping stuff. Do we have a question? Okay, cool. Any questions on that before we kind of jump into what Rush is and what it does? Cool. All right. So we're going to go ahead and jump into Rush here. I already have it pulled up, but when you launch Rush and you have projects, you can see all the different projects that are listed here. And then I'll just wait for a second. There we go. So this is a project that we were working on using Adobe Aero a while ago. You can kind of hear the room's noisy and things like that. So But basically, these are just kind of clips kind of end to end that you put together. But we're going to go ahead and work on building a set of clips right now. So if we go home, we're going to start with a new project. If you guys want to try this out yourselves, if you don't have footage to work with, Rush does come with some stock demo footage for you to use. That's what I will be using here. But we'll just kind of walk through the entire process of creating a video. And please feel free to ask questions as we go. All right, so we're going to go ahead and create a new project. And then we're going to go find our footage here. So we have this local section on the left-hand side, documents, downloads, all those things. Again, you can put the stuff in the folder where you want to find it. I'm going to go ahead and go to sample media right now. And that should be on all of ours. And then a couple kind of things to note here on this import section. We will click on the footage that we want to bring in. So we can click 1, 2, 3 and kind of select those clips, and they'll come in that order. Cool. So, but when I click on that one and I just click on this, I'm going to it brings in by default the entire clip. And typically that's not what we want, especially if you have a clip that's 5 or 10 minutes. You probably want to pick the pieces of that clip you want to use. So I want to show you guys how to do that real quick before it ever gets to the main editing window. And you guys know that you're in a Rush workshop, so I don't need that Outlook notification. Dismiss all. And for fun, we'll close Outlook. All right. I'll close that too. All right. So when I hover over one of my clips, or if you're on a mobile device, you'll see this kind of on the clip once it's selected. There's this little square right here. If I click on that, that will pull up this clip full screen here. And then I know when we did this workshop last time, we were having an issue with the audio here. So let me know if you can hear this clip. We may not be able to, and that's okay. But I want to make sure that I want to see if it worked this time. So we're going to go ahead and play through. Can you guys hear that?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Sweet. So, perfect. It's going to make this workshop way more interesting. So now we come to this section here, and then you may notice that this is highlighted in yellow. That yellow means that this piece of footage is selected throughout Rush. So if you guys have ever trimmed a clip on your phone before, it basically works the same way. Grab one of the sides, drag it over, drag one of these other sides, and drag it over. So I'm going to go ahead and listen to this real quick and just kind of pick the area that I want. Okay, cool. That works for me. And then on this top right-hand side, I can click on this go back to grid view to see my other footage. So then I can kind of click on the different ones that I want. So I'll choose this one. I'll choose this one. And then you'll see that says 1, 2, 3. That's the order that they're going to go in. So this clip will go first, or this clip will go second, and this clip will go third. Did that trimming section make sense? I hope. And then because I'll do it with this one too. But you can basically pre-edit before it ever gets into your sequence, and that can certainly be helpful, especially if you have longer pieces of footage. So now, last thing to kind of think about in this section before we start moving into editing is this bottom left-hand side. You have some options here. So you have the project name. So right now it's set to untitled. Untitled means nothing to anybody. So I highly recommend that you give this a name that makes sense. So we'll call this Level Up Workshop Demo. Cool. That will be the name of your file going forward. And then you'll see the Sync with Creative Cloud button on the bottom left-hand side. If you're going to be working between multiple platforms, I recommend having that turned on. So that way you can start on your phone and then continue to work on your computer or work on an iPad or what have you. And if you ever needed to switch computers for any reason, all you would have to do is log into your Creative Cloud account. And then once the internet catches up with you, it will download that footage you'll be using, so you can use it kind of across different devices. That's another really cool thing about Rush, is that cloud storage for your documents. So this order works fine for me. Looks good. I'm going to go ahead and hit create. And that's going to prepare my media here. And we'll kind of get going here. So just a disclaimer, we may get done before 7:30, which I think is when this workshop ends. So just letting you know, we may go a little short. We'll see though. All right, cool. So now we have our editing environment here. So there's a few different kind of areas I want to point out. we have this main window here. It's called the program window. And it's called the program window because that's where the programming that we're putting together lives, or the video that we're going to be making. Okay. So, and then we have this left side panel here, and then this right panel over here. And we'll kind of go through those and kind of work our way left to right. But first off, if you're editing on a computer, I highly recommend hitting this bottom left-hand button, this control tracks button. This will show you not only all the tracks that are available to you. So you'll see we have 1, 2, 3, 4 video tracks and 1, 2, 3, 4 audio tracks, but it will also give you the controls for your audio and your video. So you can mute and unmute footage, lock layers if you don't want to manipulate anything that's on them, and then the record button so you can record your audio back. So you can do like voiceovers and things like that, which may be something you want to do. So well, highly recommend that we have that turned on. So now, other buttons that we have here, we have this option to split clips, and that's going to be really handy in a little bit when we talk about some effects. We can duplicate clips just by clicking on duplicate. We can obviously delete. You can also select and remove those. So one thing I want to say about this editor and most editors that you're going to be working with that are for video, most video editors are non-destructive. So what that means is that all you're doing is picking the range of the original clip that you want to work with. That entire clip is available to you at any point should you want to extend or lower the clip. So keep that in mind as you're working, so that if you trim something or what have you, you can always kind of click and drag to bring it back. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, cool. You guys may or may not see a cat run by here. Her name's Isla. You can say hi if she shows up. Now that we're here, we're going to talk about this top left-hand side. We have the plus button. Plus button allows us to add things, and we'll get to adding in a minute, but I'll just kind of highlight what the content is here. When you click add, you have 3 options. You can add a title, you can add a media, or you can add a voiceover. So a title is words that are on top of there. We'll get to that in a minute. Media is any photos, video, or music that you want to use. And then voiceover is a voiceover. And we'll show you another way that I think is a little bit easier to get to that. Cool. You guys see this little like blue line that I'm clicking and dragging on right here? That's called the playhead. So that playhead shows you where you are in the footage, and you'll see that as I kind of scroll through back and forth, you'll see it shift between 1 and 2, and that's how many seconds you are in the clip. So video footage, you guys have probably heard of like frames per second before. Video is measured in hours, days, hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. So in this footage, I think it's 30 frames a second. So basically 30 frames go by, and that equals a second there. So if you see numbers like right here, it says 00:02:14, that means 2 seconds and 14 frames. So that's just a good visual indicator. And then over here, this one that's highlighted in gray is the entire sequence duration. So it says that this entire sequence is 14 seconds and 28 frames. So a little bit, a hair less than 15 seconds. That can be useful, especially if you look at your clips, you know you only have like 2 minutes of stuff done, but it says it's a 15-minute clip. Chances are that way down the timeline, there's some footage that you may need to deal with, or a song is too long, or what have you. So each clip right here, we know we're on the highlighted clip when it's yellow. Hopefully that makes sense. And then we have our play buttons right here. When you hover over, you get different keyboard shortcuts. So you can press the space bar to play. You can just kind of, I'm just clicking and dragging and hitting space bar to play through. And then you have step forward 1 frame, that's the right key. Step back is the left key. Those are all there for you. And then these other buttons here will go in between the different edit points that there are. So wherever a clip starts, that's an edit point. Or wherever you have any kind of split clips and things like that, those would be your edit points. And that's up and down on your keyboard. Cool. Hopefully that makes sense. So, do we have a question?
I have a question. Brandon, do we have to have a video before we can do a voiceover, or can we do the voiceover first and then put the videos in, possibly? Or
you need some form of media first. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a video. You could bring in like a still image because this is yet still images, but you need some measure of content on here, even if it's just like if you go to when you start a project. I'll just go back. When you start a project here, you can pick anything. So I could bring in this music track, and that will create a space for us to work in. Does that make sense?
Yep. So we can do the voiceover first, and then we could put the videos in afterwards, possibly. Maybe?
Yes, that is a distinct possibility. You'll just need some method of media, whether it would just be like a still image or what have you, for you to get started.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So when you leave your project, you'll see that it lives here. So this application does save as you go. And it will and as long as your internet connection is stable, it will save that document to the cloud if you have if you have that saved. So basically, once you stop working, it will kind of save whenever you kind of take a break or what have you. So good question. All right, so next over here, we have this full screen button. And the reason I'm showing you this is just so that you know kind of the different areas that are here. We'll get into the editing in just a second, but interface is important. This will bring something up full screen or make it basically the size of the window here. We have this loop playback button. So basically what that will do is it will loop the entire clip. So once we're done, it will run it again. Cool. And that can be useful, especially if you're running shorter videos and stuff like that, because like I said, this is built for speed and you may be building something for like social media or what have you. Just reviewing a 10-second clip or just reviewing a 10-second edit that you may make. And that loop function is really nice. You can kind of look at it and make sure that it looks good. And looping through stuff is pretty common in video. So if your thing's like 20 minutes long, maybe you won't want to loop it 1,000 times, but I'll make sure that you're aware. Cool. So this last button's super important. I guess they all are important to a measure, but this is change sequence orientation. So right now this is in 16:9. So it's kind of it's in a landscape, but if you are editing in a medium that's not landscape, like if you're editing for TikTok or Instagram video or what have you, you have the options to change from landscape to portrait or square. If you're gonna be doing that, hit portrait here. This shows up, and then you'll see that we have the black bar along the bottom. So what we'll want to do to kind of resolve that black bar, if we don't want it, is click on the footage and then scale it up to kind of make it make sense. Then we may have to move the position of it so that the people that we want in frame are in frame. But this is how you would take, probably over here, it's probably smart. Cool. So you can kind of make those changes, and this can be changed on the fly, but you'll see that once I do that, it can kind of make things look a little off when you switch. So typically I recommend set the orientation before you start or after you bring in your initial piece of footage so that you know what you're editing in. If you wanted to maybe do this video this way and then once this video is done, go back and like export it out as a different version, like for the square or landscape thing, what I might recommend is going back to the home screen here, selecting this footage, and then the drop down here. Let's see here. Is there a duplicate? Huh. Let's just duplicate the thing. Okay. Well, anyway, so that's not the idea I had. I'm thinking about Premiere Pro right now, but basically, I would get it done in one format before you move to another one. That's kind of the way you would want to do it. Cool. All right, so last button over here will allow you to adjust the size of that preview. So if you're dealing with a lot of clips like we will be in a minute, this may be a much nicer view to work in than this right here. And I'm just clicking and dragging on these two lines on the right-hand side. Any questions so far? Or do we feel okay? Cool. All right, we're gonna keep moving then. Like I said, feel free to ask questions if you got them. So what we're gonna do now is we're just gonna kind of review our footage. So I'm just clicking and dragging on this playhead. I'm just gonna kind of listen to it.
Good morning, Philippines.
Guess what we're gonna go do again. Start off.
Cool, and there's both. Cool. So I don't think that these are ordered properly. Like I think that maybe that God, I Love the Philippines should be at the end. So I can click on this guy right here to move it. So I click and drag, and you'll see that it will move once I hit an edit point, right? So you'll see right here, it's not doing a whole lot of movement, but once I kind of pass that halfway point, it will kind of slide that footage down, and it will kind of snap in place and kind of move those like that. Cool. And then this is kind of zoomed in on this bar down here. Once you hover over it, there's these little discs right here. I can click and drag on those to kind of zoom in and zoom out on my timeline. Nice. Cool. And then you kind of click and drag to move that through. So I make sure that I kind of see what I want. And this can be useful as you're editing footage. You may want to kind of zoom in to see like individual frames and things like that, and then zoom out to see the entire picture. So I just want to make sure you guys are aware of that zoom functionality that's available to you. Cool. So I'll keep this right here for now. Actually, for the sake of this, let's make it a little bigger. Cool. And I'll probably move this up a little bit just so that's a little bit easier to see my different pieces of footage here. So these little frames right here are just previews of what's at that point in the video. So now I'm going to go ahead and I want to add some additional elements here. I'll start with a title. So to add a title, we can go up here and click on the plus button, then title. That will open up a dialog box on the right-hand side that shows us our title menu. So we have titles on the right-hand side. We have all of these different titles available to us that we can choose from. And then they're kind of blocked off together. Like you'll see under this, under where it says all, you'll see all the different titles here. Some say basic default title, and that's going to show up as a title like this. We can click on this, make changes to it, name it Our Trip, or what have you. And then we can make some other changes to it. But we have our main title here, and then we have our lower third. So lower third shows up in the lower third of the screen. If you've ever watched any broadcast program before that's live, typically like news or sporting events and things like that, lower thirds are super common. And I'll just use a couple different ones. And basically what they do, once it loads, maybe. There we go, cool. What lower thirds serve to do is to inform the viewer of information. So content like this. So hopefully you guys are kind of seeing what's going on. There's a lot of different options here, and there's a lot of customization within those options. So let me go ahead and we'll pick, I'll pick this kind of standard title here for now. We'll call that Our Trip. And then you may have noticed that once I put that title down here, the title shows up on top of this footage right here. Like I said before, you have 4 layers you can work with here, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this sits on top of this layer right here. Cool. So that kind of serves as an overlay here. And I can kind of put that where I want it. And if I play through,
Good morning, Philippines.
you see it kind of shows up like that.
Guess what we're gonna go to again.
Cool. And then I can kind of move this around. So this title is sitting on top of our footage, right? And I'd argue it's a little bit hard to read if this is what we wanted here. So an option that we do have is that we can make this title a part of the main sequence down here. So I click and drag and move it down. Drop it right there. And then we have just kind of a black bar, just like a black box title right here. We can lower the size of it, and then it says Our Trip. And we can kind of jump in.
Good morning, Philip.
Cool. Sweet. So, but if I'd rather do something else, like if I wanted to move it over here, and maybe let this be the intro, the Good Morning Philippines, guess we're going to go do again snorkel, and then I want maybe Our Trip to show up right here as the title, because maybe I want a little bit of a preamble first. I can move this over here. And then if I wanted to create some visual separation, I have options within most titles. So if I select the title, make sure that clip's selected, and then the titles menu, which is up here, this first option, go to edit. And then under Our Trip, we will see all the different options that we have for this title. So we have access to all the fonts that are available on our computer, and we can look up additional fonts on Adobe fonts and sync them to our Creative Cloud account. It's pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and just pick a different title here that's maybe a little bit more blocky. Yeah, that's okay. So that is all right. But let's go ahead and we can change the text color here. So I can pick whatever I want. So lots of different ways to play here. So I can select kind of this red if I wanted to, which is okay. But one of the kind of neat things that we can do with titles, so once we highlight it, if we click on this swatch to change the text color, I'll see that there's an eyedropper tool right here. That eyedropper tool is pretty common amongst Adobe applications. What that eyedropper tool allows us to do after I enable system preferences for it. Later. Let's see if it works. All right. So what that allows us to do is that, by the way, if you're on a Mac and you're launching Rush for the first time, you absolutely want to make sure that when it asks, like, hey, do we have permission to view your downloads folder or view your documents or view your microphone? If you'd like to use Rush, you'll need to enable those things. With newer versions of Mac OS, you will run into it asking for permissions whenever applications open and want to access the files on your computer. So just a heads up. So I can select this guy right here and then pick a section, and you'll see that my swatch changes to match the section I picked. So if I click on this and I click on the boat, you'll see that's kind of white there. If I click on this eyedropper and then click on, I'm just clicking and dragging here, kind of see the colors kind of dancing around. So it might be kind of cool to find a color that's in our scene. So let's go ahead and go with this kind of, let's see if we can get like, it's all kind of dark greens. Let's go with something in the sky. Move it up here. I'll grab that blue. Cool. And that works, but if I deselect this, you'll see that it can kind of get lost. So what I might want to do is outline this. So if I do a text outline, I'll keep white and then I can increase the stroke, maybe. There we go. Highlight it, text outline, increase the stroke. And then I have kind of this funky font that has some space in the middle, but I'd argue that that's pretty easy to read. You guys have to tell me. So it's right there. And when it looks fuzzy on playback like this, basically, whenever Rush is working, it's going to try and optimize playing back at the appropriate speed over the appropriate quality. So this kind of looks kind of like this, but once I stop, you'll see that it shows up and it looks great. When you export out, it'll look great as well, especially so if you're finding that when you're playing back things look kind of a little fuzzy, I wouldn't worry too much about it, because when you're done, when you hit pause, not only will it show you the full resolution of the image, but when you export out, it'll look fine. The idea is it's built for you to be able to play back in real time, and almost every video editor will prefer playing back in real time over playing back in highest quality when you're reviewing your footage as you're editing. Does that make sense? I hope so. Sorry, I ask a lot of questions. Feel free to let me know if it doesn't. So, cool. So you can use that title in 2 places. Sweet. So, let's go ahead and we will bring in some, we'll bring in another piece of footage. So, titles can be used to kind of overlay on things or sit in between like the main source clips, right? We can also use clips to overlay on top of things. So let's go ahead and we're going to move our playhead back here. And then we're going to go ahead and hit that plus button and then go to media. We're going to pick a different piece of media here. I'm going to go ahead and pick this water aerial here. So just like before, I can go through and I can kind of trim it and see what I want there. I can click and drag to bring it onto my timeline if I want to use it as on like the second or third video layer. But if I'd rather it kind of show up in the main footage, I can click and drag it down here as well. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and use this as kind of and put this on top of here, and we'll take a look and see what it does.
Good morning, Philippines.
Guess what we're gonna go do again.
Cool. And you guys can see right here how it starts and then it sits on top and it cuts away to this other footage. This other footage serves as the B-roll for this clip. So the A-roll is what your main audio source is coming from and what's going to be sitting on your main timeline. And then B-roll is anything on top of that. Have you guys ever heard of B-roll before? Basically, if you, like I said, if you watch any like kind of modern broadcast or anything really, like news and things like that, there's a lot of news watching lately for a lot of people. Whenever they're talking and then it cuts away to something else that's playing on top of them talking, that is B-roll. So if you're doing like professional videos about yourself and you're kind of doing either a self-interview or whatever it is, you may want to consider shooting some B-roll or finding some things that could be used as B-roll. And I'll give you guys a resource here in a second that I will download another piece of footage from to use in this project where everything is Creative Commons licensed and you can use it. But B-roll is a great way to kind of break up the monotony of a video, especially if it's going to be like a one-shot you just talking to camera type of thing. Having B-roll to cut to can be really helpful. So I would recommend either shooting some additional B-roll, and it's just like you, and if it's like, let's say that you, not that any of us are going out to interview somebody, but if I were interviewing somebody at the local animal shelter, right, and they were talking about how to raise awareness about adoptions and things like that, before or after I was done interviewing them, I may go and ask if I book them for a 30-minute interview, I might book them for an hour so that I can do that 30-minute interview and then have time to go get B-roll with them of them working in the animal shelter or playing with dogs or things like that, so that we have things that are that make sense for the conversation that we're in, that we can kind of use as B-roll on top of our footage. Hopefully that makes sense. But the reason why I want to show you B-roll is because I want to show you some of the things you can do with it.
Guess what we're gonna go do again.
All right, cool. So that's a little long, so I can trim that down. And it kind of looks like this.
Morning, Philippines.
Actually, it's probably a little bit too late. So I'll be like,
Good morning, Philippines.
Guess what we're gonna go do again.
cool. So, making sense so far? I hope so. So that kind of serves as B-roll here. We can have up to 4 layers stacked here. So if I wanted to move our trip on top of this, for example, I could do that.
Good morning, Philippines.
Guess what we're gonna go
And it works like that. Cool. Making sense so far? You can see how we can use those layers right there to kind of go when you get done. Cool. So I don't have a ton of footage here, so I might need to grab another piece. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys a place where you can find Creative Commons licensed video that you can use for this project, for your projects. And there's all sorts of stuff there. It's all available to you. So if you just go to your web browser of choice, I think I already pulled it up. The website I'm using is Pexels, PEXELS.com. They also have stock photos there. I'm on the video section, but I can look for ocean and then find some footage that I might be able to use here. So I'm going to go ahead and I did this on the fly. And these may not be the same places. She said she's going to snorkel, so let's maybe look up underwater. And we'll find some underwater footage. So, like this one here. And by the way, you have a question? Oh, no, that's the footage. Sorry. So here's our footage. And then we can, these downloads are free. You can find how it's free to use right underneath these this footage. So these are free to use. No attribution is required. Credit is not necessary, but always appreciated. So like if you're doing this for a YouTube video or something like that, having just like a shout out to them in the comments where they can maybe get more followers and stuff like that can be useful. So we're gonna go ahead and download this file. It'll save. We'll just save it to the downloads folder. Let's grab one more. And basically when you're looking, whenever you're doing anything with media, it's always important to talk about copyright and how it affects people. So, sorry, another tangent, but an important one. So when you are using footage or audio that doesn't belong to you, you need to make sure that you have the rights to it. So when we're working here, all of these videos on this website and all the pictures that are here and that are in places like Unsplash are Creative Commons licensed. That means that you will be able to use them for commercial or non-commercial purposes with no attribution required. Basically, this will be the footage that you'll be able to use for free. Now, you may have heard the term royalty-free before. Royalty-free does not necessarily mean that you don't have to pay for it. That means that should you make money off the content, you don't have to pay royalties beyond the initial licensing fee. if that makes sense. So what you're looking for are things that are Creative Commons licensed if you're looking for free content to use on the internet. And then if you just, another kind of tip I might recommend is we just look up Creative Commons. Yeah, media kind of like whenever you're working with media, there's all these kind of different facets that you can spin into. You go to creativecommons.org. They have tons of resources to help you find Creative Commons licensed footage and video and music. So there's a use and remix section. You can literally click here to search their library for things that you want to use. Then you can say that you want to use it for commercial purposes or you want to modify or adapt it. So it's a great place to kind of find content. Also, the Library of Congress's website has a bunch of stuff that's in the public domain that's usable. So I want to make sure you guys are aware of just some of the things that you might have access to. Let me go ahead and grab one more piece of footage here. This works. I recommend being more selective than I'm being, but I'm just trying to do this in real time for you guys. So go ahead and hit OK. Boom, boom. All right, cool. So now we're going to go and go back to our project here. Now we're in our project. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring in some more footage. Let's go ahead and we'll move this over here. Cool. So now I'm going to go ahead and bring in some more footage, kind of right about here. This will be a really short video, but hopefully you guys will kind of see what's going on here. So I'm going to go ahead and I can go through this sample media folder and then hit the back arrow and then locate, got it allowed to see it, all of my different folders right here, and I can find my footage. Alternatively, if I didn't want to use this, I could go to my Finder and then locate it and then click and drag it in. You can do either way, but just this method helps kind of keep everything, I think, together. So if we look at this footage, I'll click on it to view it. And we'll see that it's 2 minutes long. I really don't need 2 minutes here. While this is cool footage, maybe not exactly what I need. So let's go ahead and we will kind of trim this up. So I can trim using these guys, but if you want a keyboard shortcut for trimming, you can mark the in point and the out point by finding where you want to start, pressing I to mark in, then playing. Then once you get to where you want to mark out, press O to mark out. So I to mark in, O to mark out, and then we can click and drag on this footage to place it. The I and O is pretty common in most video applications, pretty universal way to kind of mark the beginnings and ends of your clips. Cool. Let me know if you have any questions on that one. All right, we'll keep moving. I'll go ahead and pick this guy right here, and I'll do the same thing. Press the space bar to play through. And I will mark in, and then mark out. And then I will click and drag to place. And you'll see that this clip is a little bit shorter than maybe I wanted to, so I can drag that out. And as long as I have the footage there, it will drag out for me. Cool. All right. So now you may notice that I have 3 layers of video stacked on top of each other here, right? And I also have a couple different layers that have some different audio on them. So if I hide it, so I'm going to go ahead and mute these audio layers and kind of start from the bottom. I have this bottom one that sounds like this, kind of is the sound of the boat. Cool. And then I'll mute this one and unmute the next one. This next one sounds like this. Maybe. It's thinking. There we go. It's the underwater noise, right? And this next one sounds like this. Cool. So I can have all of those 3 kind of running at the same time. That's probably not what I want to do. I'll probably want to pick one. And since I started with the boat, I'll probably keep it on the boat. But I'll just mute these other channels here. I can mute those that way. And then once I do that, it'll sound a bit like this. Oh, I have to unmute that one. Sorry. There we go. Cool. Nice. So I can have this kind of stacked on top of each other. Now you'll notice that only this footage of this turtle is on top of here. So I kind of stacked these on purpose, and I want to show you guys something kind of neat about Rush. So when I have my footage kind of set up here, I can go and I can crop it. So to crop footage, and we're kind of trimming it over here. And trimming is kind of shortening the duration. A crop would be lowering, would be adjusting the field of view that we see here. This is also the transform menu where you can adjust scale and things like that. So I'll walk you guys through that real quick. I'm gonna go ahead and hide this first bit of footage here. Start. And then the first thing we'll talk about is kind of like, how do we get a picture in picture here? So if I wanted this to be sitting up in the top right or the top left-hand side like a news broadcast, I'll show you how to do it. So I'll select the footage that I want to use, make sure it's visible here. And then I'm going to go under this bottom button right here on the left-hand side is the crop menu. So this is where I can crop and rotate my footage. We talked a little, you kind of saw like you can click on it and then click and drag the corners. We did that a little earlier in the workshop, but from here we can have maybe a little bit more control over what that looks and feels like. So I'm going to start with under scale. I have width. I'm going to go ahead and maintain proportions so that as I scale down, it gets smaller, right? So I can click and drag to adjust that scale, like so. This is going to make sure that I don't stretch the footage out. If for whatever reason I wanted to stretch that footage, so maybe I'm going for like an interesting effect or something like that, I can uncheck this and then I can freely kind of transform this and kind of stretch this out however it is I'd like. So there may be a reason why you want to do that. I don't want to do that here. I'm just going to undo a couple times. Command Z on a Mac, Control Z on Windows, just like a Word document. Then go back to before I uncheck to maintain proportions. Click on that, move it into a corner like so. And then once I play back, you'll see it shows up on the top right-hand side right there. Cool. Making sense so far, I hope. So these layers are top down. So you'll see that this layer is above this layer. So this hidden layer is above this layer. So I don't want to accidentally move that. So make sure that you have the layer you want selected. And then you can click on this. You'll know you have the right layer selected. Not only when this is highlighted in yellow, but when you click on the footage window itself, you'll see these little widgets here to move this around. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and step back actually. There we go. And then I can adjust the opacity right here. So if something is opaque, that means that you can't see through it. So if I lower the opacity, it becomes more and more transparent so that we can see through it. And this can be kind of a neat way to get just a little bit of a different effect there if you wanted to do that. So make sure we have the right footage selected and crank that back up to 100. We can also rotate this footage 180 degrees in the other direction. Make sure you guys don't get sick. But we can also dial in a specific degree here. So if we wanted this to be rotated 15 degrees, we could do that if we wanted to. But yeah, make sure you're aware of that. And then we can adjust. We're already clicking and dragging to move this thing around. But if we wanted to adjust that vertical position with the slider, we can adjust that there as well. Cool. So does that make sense? I'll ask that question. Cool. All right, let me know if it doesn't. So now if we move on, we've done everything under the basic menu, but there's also an advanced menu, and that's really where I think things can kind of get interesting here. So if I click on advanced, this is where I will get to the opportunity where I can crop footage. So you go ahead and select this top footage here, and then we'll start kind of cropping. And again, this application does work top down, so it's going to look at the top layer first. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select this footage here, and then under crop, I'll see that I can crop to the left or the right, top and bottom. I'm going to go ahead and crop the bottom. So what we see is this right here. And then I'm going to click on this guy. I'm going to crop the bottom again. And actually, so that bottom crop is at like, I want to put that at 66.6. Just 66%. Cool. That way I have like kind of even thirds here. I'm going to go ahead and move this crop to 33.3. And then just crop here on the bottom. So you'll see I have kind of all three of these pieces of footage playing at the same time, which can look kind of cool, but just kind of one neat thing you can do with the layers that are here. I just chose that kind of vertical crop, but you could have chosen whatever crop you wanted. You could slice it 5 ways vertically or whatever you wanted to do just by adjusting these parameters. But again, something kind of cool that can kind of give you some different perspectives here. And then the other thing that you can do here is, so I have this boat at the bottom, but I can click on this bottom layer here, and then I could move this down a little bit if I wanted to maybe see some more of that mountain here. So you have some artistic license here. I think that looks a little bit better. So you can kind of see where we're at in between those different pieces of footage. And then, oh, this might be kind of cool. So one other thing that we can do is that we can adjust the length of these clips so that they kind of stagger into place. That looks like this. So I'll go ahead and I'll take this clip here. I'll move the playhead maybe forward a second. Then I'll click and drag this first clip to right there maybe. Actually, so we have that trim, right? But let's talk about splitting real quick. So if I select the air, so if I move my playhead to where I want it to be, I can split a clip by either clicking on the scissors here or pressing the S key. To press the S key, it splits it into 2 pieces. I can select this right piece and delete it. And then I can come back here, maybe right here, select this footage, select this piece, select the first one I want to remove and delete it. And then this is what maybe like a staggered looking clip might look like. Or the other way around. But hopefully you get the idea that we can kind of introduce these guys in a more kind of unique way. And if I was doing that for real, I may want to make that a little faster. So once it plays back, it kind of feels like this. So boom, boom, boom. So that can be kind of a cool way to kind of show different pieces of footage here. A little bit artistic, and then it goes back to, whoop, cool. All right, making sense so far, I hope? Is there a way to add transitions? Yes, there is. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So good question. So we can add transitions like fade-ins and fade-outs so that we don't get these kind of hard snaps in between different pieces of footage. For things on the internet, like these kind of, they call them jump cuts. These jump cuts are pretty common. Look at a YouTube video. Rarely is there a transition to be found whenever people are talking. Can we also go over adjusting the speed of a clip? For sure. I think we're here till 8, so we should be able to get that done, but we'll move pretty quick. So now, what we'll do is that, let's go ahead and talk about transitions now. So if I'm trying to move between one piece of footage and another one, I can either just kind of do this hard cut or add a transition. So to add a transition, we will go up to our transitions menu. At this point, there are only 3. There's cross dissolve, dip to black, and dip to white. So transitions are traditionally used whenever there is a shift whenever there's a shift in either space or time. So what I mean by that is, like, if we go from this scene's at morning to this scene's at night, or this scene's in Paris and this scene is in New York. We would use those typically to give our audience a chance to adjust to the change that we have there. Although, like, if you've seen, there's all sorts of ways to do transitions. You do transitions like most, like, those Marvel movies do, where they just have name of the place with like a big title on it. It's like Paris, and then it's just like you sit on Paris for a second. So lots of different ways to do it. We'll use this cross dissolve for this one. So if I click and drag, I can place a cross dissolve here. And this little icon right here, this little gray box, means that I have a transition. So transitions look like this. And I know that my playback is a little slow. It's a little choppy on your end. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of slowly scroll through it. But your transitions look like this. You'll see that one, with the cross dissolve, one thing fades out as another one fades in. Now you may notice that she froze right there. And the reason why she froze right there is because it made that transition without any extra information on this clip. This clip was kind of cut off early, so it holds that frame to finish the transition. If you don't want that held frame right there, that's when you would want to make sure that that you trimmed it so that you have some extra bits on the end so that it looks smooth. So that will look like this. So if I pull this back a little bit, you'll see that they're moving basically the entire time through that transition. Cool. Does that make sense? All right. So now we have dip to black. That will basically take the footage and drop it to black and then bring up the next piece of footage. That can be really helpful if you want it to look like, kind of looks like a blink, but the idea is that you're just moving from one space to another. That's great for kind of, it can be great for kind of more like, if you're looking for not necessarily a somber mood, but like you have the dip to white and you have the dip to black, and basically your mileage will vary with these, but you'll see that it goes to white and comes back up. This feels a little bit more dreamy, so I might go with that for this particular clip, and there's a lot of white in both of these things anyway, so it just kind of allows us to move to another space, right? So we can also use these transitions when we have these kind of title cards that are on separate layers here. So I could throw a cross dissolve on one side and the other, and that will serve as kind of a fade in and fade out for this title. So see, it fades in. I'll just scrub through. Fades in, fades out. And I can adjust those by clicking and dragging right here. Cool. Now, one thing that I'll say about titles is that they behave like any other piece of footage, which is awesome. So what that means is that if you ever use applications like iMovie and Windows Movie Maker, they don't give you this particular tool. But basically, I can move this. I can move this title and kind of put it in a different location. So that's super powerful. And as simple as it sounds, it's not available in all applications. So kind of neat. And you can absolutely like stack 4 titles or whatever combination of 4 things you want for this footage. And then all 4 of these things show up. And then I will throw cross dissolves. So if I wanted all of 4 of these things to kind of stay up and then fade out together, what I want to do is I want to throw a cross dissolve on each one. Maybe. There we go. And then a cross dissolve on that as well. So I'm going to increase the length of that one just a little bit so that these all kind of fade out at the same time, if that makes sense. So typically, that's what you want to do here. And if you want to remove a transition, just hit the delete key. But does that make sense for transitions? Cool. So when you do a voiceover, does it go on the A roll? Does it go on A roll? No. It will go on whatever track down here we have at the bottom. So we have the A roll, we have A roll, then all of our B roll here for this video, and then we have our own audio tracks down here. And we'll get to that in just a moment when we talk about audio. So, but feeling okay so far? Cool. And those are essentially like the basics of bringing in video and editing it in here. Basically, we're going to spend the last probably take about 15 minutes to get through, just talking about audio and the different ways we can play with it. And then we'll export it out, and then we'll talk about next steps, and we'll wrap up this workshop. Does that sound good? Cool. All right. Let me know if it doesn't. Feel free to say something. Yeah, we'll talk about sharing, and let's talk about sharing in that last 15, for sure. So things like YouTube and whatnot. So now what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and bring up our audio. So I mentioned before on this bottom left-hand side we had this control tracks thing. Right above that you'll see expand audio. I want to expand audio so you guys can see the waveforms that are here. You've probably seen waveforms before. They're these little guys right here. I'll just kind of scroll this up a little bit so it's a little bit easier to see. So these are called waveforms. And basically they are simply showing you the amplitude of your clip. So like how loud it is. These are just visual representations of how loud it is. These are people talking, so these like spikes in audio are normal. In this particular clip, this is like a boat going by. So that whole like constant noise level right there makes sense. And then over here, we have some more people talking and some other things. Cool. So let's talk about audio a little bit. Let's talk about how to clean up audio. So we'll start with this last clip. It's got some decent wind noise to it.
So God, I love Philippines.
You kind of hear that low end, like, whoa, 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 business there. So if you select the clip, under the audio tools, keyboard shortcut is Command or Control 5 for this button right here. You'll see Basic right here. Advanced stays kind of in this drop-down menu, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that to drop it down. We have a lot of different things that we can adjust here. The first thing is you'll see that this recognizes as a voice track because you're basically using Adobe's algorithm, Adobe Sensei. It analyzes the track and sees that it's a voice. You can change this if you want. So there are kind of 3 tracks you can live in, and these 3 can interact with each other. So it's important to kind of set the right voice track, the right track type. This is already set to voice, so I don't need to mess with it. But what I want to do is I want to attempt to reduce the background noise. So I have some wind here. Let me go and play that back a little bit.
So God, I love Philippines.
Kind of hear that wind noise in the background.
So God, I love Philippines.
That whoa, 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 whoa. So if I click on reduce background noise, it'll go through and it will attempt to cut that down a little bit.
So God, I love Philippines.
You'll see it did a pretty good job of kind
So
of
God, I love Philippines.
getting rid of a little bit of that content here. So you also have a slider so you can increase the intensity, but if you increase the intensity kind of like full bore,
So God, I love Philippines.
sometimes people sound like they're kind of in a can. So with all of these types of sliders, typically it's a salt and pepper proposition. That's how I like to call it. Basically less is more. You use salt and pepper to season food. You don't eat salt and pepper. It's kind of how I think of it. So think of that kind of as you're going through this stuff. There are also other really cool options. So if there are a lot of different dynamics in your track, like somebody's really quiet, then somebody's like talking really quiet, then talking really loud, this balance sound option may be helpful. And what balance sound does, this little animation shows you, it will take the highest and lowest amplitude of your clips and try and make them more even across a track. Like you may notice in movies, like when somebody whispers, like you hear the whisper, but it's as easy to hear as like a yell might be. And that's typically the result of proper proper balancing of sound. This basically improves the dynamics of your of the audio there. And you don't need to use it all the time. Like if I were processing this particular workshop, I'm keeping a pretty constant volume here, so I probably wouldn't use too much dynamic. I probably wouldn't balance the sound of this. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. If you kind of talk really loud and talk really soft, then that balance of sound may be super helpful. Cool. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to bring in some music. So you can put in background music on these guys. I'm going to go hit the plus button here, go to media, because that's where anything that's not my footage will be. That's anything that's any measure of footage, whether it be video, music, or photos, will be here. So I'm going to go ahead and pick the music I want to use. Let's take a listen. I'll click on this button right here. All right. Sure, that sounds great. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this up a little bit because I know that my footage is only 14 seconds long. So all I need is like a little bit longer than that. So I will do like 16 seconds, maybe. Just going to trim that down. And 19 is okay. Cool. We'll do 16 and then I will just click on this button to add it to the selection. And then add. And I'll bring in my music here. All right. Then get rid of that guy. All right. Cool. Move this over. You see, you can just kind of click and drag my music. So when you bring in your music initially, one thing that I accidentally brought in that footage, so I deleted it. So one thing that Rush will do automatically, especially you'll see this when you're in the audio section, is that it will go ahead and put in auto volume here for us. So you see how high those peaks get when auto volume is not enabled? That sounds like this. And basically,
Good morning, Philippines.
We're gonna go do
you'll see it's way louder than the rest of the footage there. So this auto volume here will basically look at the highest amplitude of your footage and then bring the music down
Good morning, Philippines.
so that it sits a little bit better in that
We're
mix.
gonna go do again.
Cool. So, but probably my favorite thing about the audio section in Rush, and I even like this more than the audio section in Premiere Pro, is this auto duck feature. So if I click on auto duck, basically what it will do is it will take a look at all of my tracks, and then wherever there's a voice track, it will lower the volume of the clip automatically. So that sounds like this.
Good morning, Philippines.
Guess what we're gonna go do?
And that's a little bit too much, so I can slide this reduce by slider down to like say 65 or so.
Go do again. Start off.
Go ahead and reduce that by a little bit less. And you'll see that it moves a little bit every time that I reduce that down. So reduce that by like 44. And then
We're gonna go do again.
once I get to this other clip, the music will come back up. And then it will drop back down automatically. Cool. So that auto ducking is super handy, and basically you just set it and forget it once you kind of get the levels where you want them. So hopefully that made sense. It's pretty cool. Cool. Any questions on that before we move on to the last bit for audio, which is slowing down and speeding up footage? So if I wanted to slow down this footage, like we've been listening to,
Again. Start off.
we've been listening to Snorkel a couple times here today. So let's go ahead and let's play with that section right there since we're familiar with what it sounds like. So right above the sound section, you will find this speed section. And here's where you will speed down or speed up or slow down footage. Keyboard shortcut is Command 4 on a Mac, Control 4 on a Windows machine. So so with speed, you have range and then you have range speed. So you need to set the range that you want to manipulate first. If it's this whole clip, I can leave it as is. But if it's not, I can either grab these two dots right here or these two like little speed flags right here, and then click and drag to select the range that I want to manipulate. So what I want to manipulate is,
Guess what we're gonna go do again. Start off.
I want to manipulate this part where it says snorkel yay. Okay, so hopefully you guys can hear that all right. So what I'm going to do is I can manipulate the speed right here. So I'm going to go ahead and decrease this to like 60%. And that will slow down this footage.
Again. Start off.
Cool. So, so that slowed that down. But you'll notice that it maintained pitch. So that's because we have maintain audio pitch turned on. I like turning this off for this particular clip because I think it sounds kind of fun. But we'll go ahead and hit that and then guess. And she should say,
We're gonna go do again.
so if you're going for that kind of look or feel, that's how you might accomplish that there. There's also this ramp button, which will make it so that you can, you'll see this little slope shows up here. So it'll kind of roll into that.
Do again.
You can actually kind of, and we'll go ahead and increase that ramp to like 2 seconds just so you can hear it a little bit better. So you'll see it goes from normal volume and then kind of ramps into that slow motion.
Guess what we're gonna go do again.
So I'm using it for audio here. You do not need to use it for audio. You can absolutely just use this thing to speed up or slow down a piece of footage. Like if you were writing an essay or something like that, or you were typing, you wanted the typing to look really fast, or you wanted maybe you were building something, you wanted that to feel like a time lapse, you would absolutely use this method to adjust the speed of the footage. So does that answer the question about the retiming of a clip? Sweet. Okay, so we have our masterpiece. and we're kind of ready to move forward here. But last thing I'll show you before we do that is this last button right here are different looks for your footage. This color section. These are kind of presets. Just click and apply different looks here. So black and white, all these other guys right here. You can also go through, hit the edit button, then you have the ability to adjust exposure, brightness, contrast, and all of those things. There's also an advanced section for like, give it like this faded film look, or give it sharpening, or do what's called a vignette. So a vignette is either a white or a black kind of border around the edge of your footage. So it kind of shows up white, shows up black. Those are all available to you there. On any of these sliders, if you make big changes to them, you can double click on them to reset them to center. But these presets are pretty nice. And then just click like kind of one button fixes, and these are kind of meant to mimic different like looks of things. I'll go with the normal one because I think it's okay. We'll reset that. Cool. But I want to make sure that you guys are aware of that. And then if you wanted the look to be on one piece of the footage and not the other, so like if you wanted where she says snorkel to maybe turn black and white, what you do is select the clip here, split it, then select the right clip, and then put this maybe night filter on it. Just that kind of separates right there like that.
Guess what we're gonna go do again.
But you see there's a really abrupt bit here, so I might want to combine that with a cross dissolve in between those two clips. Even though it's the same clip, it's two different colors. So you'll see that it kind of fades in to that other look as opposed to just a hard snap there. So
Do again.
So that way you kind of have that nice transition there. Cool. All right. Everything making sense so far? Okay. And hopefully you feel like you've learned something about video editing inside of Rush. This is really about what it's like. I probably over-explained a bunch of things, but I want to make sure that you kind of saw all the different options you have available to you. And hopefully you feel confident to go ahead and go in and start cutting stuff up. So lastly, but not leastly, we need to talk about how to share this. So once you're ready to export, or once you're ready to kind of share here, if you're in the edit menu right now, we'll want to go to share, which is directly to the right of that. Then once you share, you have a couple different options here. If you wanted to upload to YouTube, so the cool thing about Rush is that you can upload to multiple spaces at once. So you could upload to YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or Behance, and then basically it will create a video that's optimized for those platforms and post them there if you want it to. So you just flip the switch, and then it will put all your different, it'll ask you to log in to publish directly. Then you'll be able to put in things like, you can add a thumbnail to it right there. You can add your descriptions and all of your tags and all that stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and just export locally. And then with that local video, you can upload it wherever you want as well. Cool. So first things first. Under file name, it says sequence 01. And just like untitled 01, this means nothing to anybody. So I highly recommend that you give this a name. That makes sense, especially if you're turning in for an assignment. Chances are that your instructor has a name structure that they want you to use, so you can put that here, because this is our final exported out piece. So we'll call this Level Up Demo. Cool. One. And then where it says Save To, you can click on this to kind of decide where you want to put it. This is also very important because you need to be able to find the things that you make. I'm going to save this to the desktop just for easy access. And hit choose. And then under advanced settings, I can change a whole lot of things here, like what resolution it's in, what frame rate it's in. But basically, it will, your device, Rush will kind of export out whatever you gave it. So if you wanted the edit to be the same as the thing that you had, just leave this advanced setting alone and it will kind of do the work for you. Now we're going to go ahead and hit export here. Now I'm on a pretty beefy machine, so this moves pretty fast. But when you're exporting out or when you're sharing out, I highly recommend that a part of your timeline for turning stuff in incorporates rendering, which is what this just did. So that's exporting out your footage, because basically What your computer has to do when you render is take all the different pieces and stitch them together. And that's a pretty mean process for your computer. And if there's a place where things go wrong, it's typically here. So highly recommend that if something's due at midnight, you start that render a couple of hours beforehand if you can make that work. So that way, in case something goes wrong and you have to re-render, which can happen sometimes, because like I said, you're doing the meanest things to your computer that you can do. You're asking it to not only read from the hard drive it's on. If you're not using an external hard drive, you're asking it to write to that hard drive at the same time. You're also taxing your the memory on your computer. You're taxing the graphics card and the CPU. So all of those things are being asked to do stuff. And if there is a glitch in any of those, that can result in a bad render or the render failing, which is why it gives you like a progress bar. But that's more of just a cautionary tale than anything. But basically, make sure that you give yourself plenty of time on that render because you may need it. Cool. And then you still have to upload it wherever it's going to upload. So keep that in mind too. The render is not the final thing. The upload and submission is probably the final thing. Give yourself some time to do those things. Internet connection is going to affect how fast things render, how fast things upload. So I'm going to hit done here, go to Finder, look at my footage. I'm going to go ahead and double click it to view it. And here's my final video. I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. And play it through real quick just so you can kind of see what it looks like, and you'll.
Good morning, Philippines.
Guess what we're gonna go do again?
So you can see we kind of went for function over form here, but hopefully you get the idea of the types of things you can accomplish with Rush. And I think that's the bulk of what I wanted to talk about. I would love to leave the last, does that exporting process make sense? What you do and how you do it? I'd love to open it up to questions that you have. And yeah, then we'll wrap this guy up. What questions do y'all have?
So maybe the best way, Brian, to do the voiceover first for maybe our videos is to, I guess, put a bunch of random clips in from the like generic shots, and then do the voiceover after muting all the videos, and then we could put like our footage in for the snapshot video, possibly, maybe.
So I wouldn't do a bunch of random clips. I would absolutely be deliberate. Just bringing in something initially if you want to record a voiceover first.
Yep, that's my plan for it.
Yeah, so just bring in a thing. I would not bring in a ton of things because then you have to remove them. But to do a voiceover, you select the clip that you want, and then there's this little recording button right here. I'll click on that. That arms the track. They call it arming the track. It shows up red, and then when you click on this red button, it's going to count us in after we allow microphone access. And then it will record a voiceover of what I'm talking about.
We're gonna go.
Cool. Then when I play back, go ahead and mute this. Cool. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Cool.
Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm listening over speakers, so that's why we heard the background things. I probably want to mute that next time. But yeah, that's essentially how you would do it. Then you can trim this up and do multiple things. And that auto duck still plays with the voiceover. So if I move this voiceover to this section right here, you'll see that it recognizes it as a voice, and it auto ducks for me right there. Cool. What other questions do we have? I'm okay with silence for a minute while you think too. Not uncomfortable. Cool. Well, I guess like I want to say thank you all for kind of taking the time to kind of show up and hang out. Hopefully you picked up something here. And I would love to, I'll stick around, see if anybody else has any other questions, but I hope that you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. As far as kind of places to go next, the last thing I'll say is that if you want it, if Rush wasn't doing enough things for you, you can open up a Rush project inside of Premiere Pro. So you have more editing options here. You don't have to do this, but this is great for if you want to be able to do more advanced things, or if you use Premiere Pro primarily, but all you have is your phone to edit on. You can start the edit on Rush on your phone, and then when you go to your computer, you can open up a Premiere Rush project inside of Premiere Pro. So you'll just open up Premiere Pro, which I already have open, click on Open Rush Project, and then select the one you want to use. And then once you do, it will import that into Premiere Pro so that you can start using it. So I'll say that this is a one-way street. So you can go from Premiere Rush to Pro, but you can't go from Pro to Rush, if that makes sense. Cool. All righty, I think that's all I have for this one. But if you guys wanted to learn more things, I always recommend help.adobe.com. They have an entire tutorial section on Rush that can kind of walk through more things. There's tutorials here. But yeah, cool. All right. So thanks so much for hanging out, guys. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Let me know if I can be of any help. Catch you later.